In the vast reaches of space, where ancient civilizations have ruled for millennia, there exists a truth that terrifies even the mightiest species. Humans are not what they appear to be. What the galaxy sees as weak, primitive creatures stumbling through the stars are actually something far more dangerous. When the proud Draconian Empire received what they believed was a sacrificial offering, an ugly human infant left at their temple doors, they thought they were getting an easy meal for their sacred dragons. The baby was small, hairless, and pathetic by galactic standards. Even the humans who left it seemed ashamed, calling it deformed and unwanted. But as the great dragon Vorthak lifted the tiny creature to its massive jaws, something impossible happened. The baby looked up at the ancient predator and smiled. Not with fear, not with confusion, but with pure, innocent joy. In that moment, everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity began to unravel. What they discovered would shake the foundations of interstellar civilization and reveal why humans, despite appearing so fragile, had spread across the galaxy faster than any species in recorded history. The truth wasn't just shocking, it was revolutionary. This is the story of how one ugly, human baby changed everything. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystalline spires of Drakmor, the capital city of the Draconian Empire. High Priest Zethrak stood before the massive obsidian altar, his scaled hands trembling as he read the message that had arrived with the Dawn Shuttle. The humans of the nearby colony world had sent another offering, but this one was different. This one came with an apology. "Forgive us, great ones," the message read in broken draconian script. "We know this offering is not worthy of your magnificence. The child is malformed and ugly by our standards. We understand if you reject it, but we have nothing else to give. Please accept our humility." Zethrak's golden eyes narrowed as he looked at the small transport pod sitting at the base of the altar steps. Inside, he could hear the soft sounds of an infant, quiet gurgling, and the occasional sniffle. In his 300 years serving the sacred dragons, he had seen many offerings from many species. The desperate always brought their children when they had nothing else left to give. But never had anyone apologize for their offering's appearance. The Draconian Empire had dominated this sector of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. Their dragons were living gods, massive, intelligent creatures that could incinerate entire starships with their breath, and whose wisdom guided the Empire through the endless complexities of interstellar politics. To be chosen as food for a dragon was considered the highest honor any lesser species could receive. Their essence would become part of something divine. Zethrak approached the pod and pressed the release mechanism. The transparent aluminum lid hissed open, revealing the contents within. He stepped back, genuinely surprised by what he saw. The human infant was indeed unusual. Where most sentient species in the galaxy were born with fur, scales, or some other protective covering, this creature was almost entirely hairless except for a few sparse strands on its oversized head. Its skin was a pale pink color that looked raw and vulnerable. Most disturbing of all were its eyes, large, round, and completely lacking the fierce glow that marked intelligent predators. Instead, they held something that made Zethrak deeply uncomfortable: curiosity. The baby was awake, looking around the temple with those strange, soft eyes. When its gaze fell upon Zethrak's imposing 7-foot frame and reptilian features, it didn't cry or cower as young creatures should when faced with a superior predator. Instead, it made a sound Zethrak had never heard before, a kind of musical bubbling that almost sounded like joy. "Peculiar," Zethrak muttered in his native tongue, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air around the child. The scent was wrong, too. Most young creatures smelled of fear and milk and their species' particular pheromones. This one smelled like possibility, like potential energy waiting to be unleashed. The great bronze doors at the far end of the temple began to open with a sound like distant thunder. Vorthak was coming. The ancient dragon had served as the primary deity of this temple for over 8 centuries, and his wisdom was sought by the emperor himself. If anyone could make sense of this strange offering, it would be him. Vorthak emerged from the sacred chambers slowly, each of his massive footsteps causing the temple's crystal formations to ring like bells. He was magnificent, nearly 40 feet long from nose to tail, with scales that shifted between deep emerald and burnished gold depending on the light. His wings were folded against his massive frame, but even so, he filled most of the temple's vast space. Ancient scars crisscrossed his hide, each one a story of battles fought across the galaxy. What offering have humans brought this time, old friend? Vorthak's voice resonated through both sound and telepathy, causing the temple's crystals to vibrate in harmony. Something unusual, Great One, Zethrak replied, bowing deeply. They claim it is malformed and ugly, yet you sense something different about it. Vorthak's massive head lowered toward the transport pod, his dinner plate-sized eyes focusing on the tiny figure within. Interesting. This one does not smell of fear. The dragon's enormous nostril flared as he took in the infant scent. His eyes suddenly widened, pupils dilating despite the bright temple lighting. For a moment that stretched into eternity, the ancient dragon simply stared at the human baby. Then, the impossible happened. The baby looked directly into Vorthak's eyes and smiled. Not the reflexive facial movement that some species exhibited, but a genuine expression of delight and recognition. It raised one tiny, pink hand toward the dragon's massive snout and made that same musical sound Zethrak had heard earlier. Vorthak reared back so suddenly that several of the temple's crystal formations cracked from the displaced air. His mind touched Zethrak's with such force that the priest stumbled backward. By the ancient fires, Vorthak's mental voice was barely controlled. Zethrak, what do you know of this species? These humans? Very little, Great One. They are a young race, barely 500 years since they achieved spaceflight. They have spread quickly across several systems, but they seem peaceful enough. Weak, certainly. They have no natural weapons, no protective covering, no apparent psychic abilities. Most of the galaxy considers them harmless primitives who are useful only for manual labor and offerings such as this. Harmless primitives, Vorthak repeated, his mental voice carrying a note of something that might have been amusement or terror. Tell me, old friend, in all your studies of galactic history, have you ever encountered a species that could look upon a dragon without fear while still maintaining their sanity? Zethrak thought carefully. In the vast databases of the Draconian Empire, there were records of thousands of sentient species. All of them showed appropriate fear when faced with dragons. Even the mighty Korthak warrior priests, who could tear through starship hulls with their bare claws, knew to submit in the presence of dragonkind. It was simple evolutionary wisdom. Apex predators inspired fear in all other life forms. It was as universal as gravity or time. No, Great One, never. Even the most powerful telepaths among the Zephyrians require mental conditioning to look directly upon your magnificence without fleeing. And yet this tiny creature not only looks upon me without fear, but appears to find joy in my presence. Vorthak's massive head moved closer to the pod again, this time more cautiously. There is something else, Zethrak. When it looked at me, for just a moment, I felt something I have not experienced in 800 years. What did you feel, Great One? Kinship. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Dragons did not feel kinship with lesser beings. They were apex predators, living gods who stood apart from all other life. They might feel amusement, irritation, or satisfaction when dealing with other species, but never kinship. It was biologically impossible. The baby made another sound, different this time, a softer version of that musical bubbling. It was looking at Vorthak again, and its tiny hand was still reaching toward him. Great One, Zethrak said carefully. Perhaps we should consult the archives before proceeding. If this species is somehow unusual. No, Vorthak's mental voice was firm, but not harsh. I will not consume this one. Not yet. There is something here that requires understanding. But the offering has been made. The humans will expect, the humans will receive what they need, but not what they expect. Vorthack's massive form settled onto the temple floor, his great head lowering until he was at eye level with the transport pod. "Tell me, little one, what are you really?" The baby, of course, could not answer in any language Vorthack would recognize. But it did something that sent chills through both dragon and priest. It reached out with its tiny hand and touched the very tip of Vorthack's snout. The moment of contact was electric, literally. A small discharge of energy passed between them, so subtle that Zethrak might have missed it if he hadn't been watching so intently. Vorthack's eyes rolled back in his massive skull, and for a terrifying moment, Zethrak thought the great dragon might be having some kind of seizure. But when Vorthack's eyes refocused, they held an expression the priest had never seen before: wonder. "By all the fires of creation," Vorthack whispered, his mental voice barely a whisper. "Zethrak, seal the temple. Allow no one to enter or leave without my express permission." "Great One, what did you see?" "I saw the future, old friend. And it is both more terrible and more beautiful than anything our empire has ever imagined." Vorthack's gaze never left the human infant. This species, they're not what they appear to be. They are not primitives. They are not weak. Then what are they? Vorthack was quiet for a long moment, his massive mind processing what he had experienced during that brief contact. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of cosmic revelation. "They are gardeners. I do not understand, Great One. Neither did I, until now. But this little one, it showed me images. Not with telepathy, but with something far more subtle. Something that bypassed my mental defenses entirely." Vorthack's scales rippled with colors that had no names. "They do not conquer worlds, Zethrak. They cultivate them. They do not dominate other species. They nurture them. And they do not fear us because—" The dragon paused, struggling with concepts that challenged everything he thought he knew about the universe. "Because they see us not as predators to be feared, but as children to be guided." Zethrak felt his knees grow weak. "That is impossible, Great One. We are dragons. We are the apex of evolution. We are what they helped us become." The silence that followed was deafening. In the transport pod, the human baby continued to make soft, content sounds, completely unaware that its mere presence had just shattered the foundational beliefs of one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. "Send word to the Emperor," Vorthack said finally. "Tell him that I require an immediate audience." And Zethrak, "Yes, Great One. Prepare the deep archives. We're going to need to rewrite everything we think we know about the history of our species, and perhaps the entire galaxy." As Zethrak hurried to carry out his instructions, Vorthack remained with the human infant, studying it with new eyes. The baby had fallen asleep, one tiny hand still resting against the dragon's snout. In its dreams, it smiled, and Vorthack found himself wondering what dreams could make a creature smile while touching death incarnate. Outside the temple, the first transport ships were beginning to arrive. Word had somehow already spread through the city that something unprecedented was happening in the Temple of the Sacred Flame. By nightfall, representatives from across the Empire will be demanding answers. But for now, in the quiet sanctuary of the temple, an ancient dragon kept watch over a sleeping human baby and slowly began to understand that everything the galaxy thought it knew about power, about evolution, and about the nature of intelligence itself was about to change forever. Emperor Thaction arrived at the Temple of the Sacred Flame 3 hours after receiving Vorthack's summons. The ancient ruler of the Draconian Empire had not personally visited a temple in over 2 centuries, but when the oldest and wisest dragon in the realm demanded an immediate audience, even emperors listened. He found Vorthack in the temple's deep archives, surrounded by crystalline data storage matrices that had not been accessed in millennia. The human infant sat in an improvised nest of ceremonial silks, playing with what appeared to be a small piece of temple crystal that glowed softly in its tiny hands. The sight was so surreal that Thaction stood speechless for several moments. "My Emperor," Vorthack's mental voice carried formal respect, but also an urgency that Thaction had never heard before. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Your message spoke of revelations that would shake the foundations of our empire. I trust this is not an exaggeration. Faction's own telepathic voice was carefully controlled, but Vorthak could sense the curiosity burning beneath the imperial composure. See for yourself. Vorthak gestured with one massive claw toward the nearest archive matrix. I've been searching our oldest records, the ones that predate our written history, the ones we thought were mere legend. The archive matrix hummed to life, projecting three-dimensional holographic images into the air above them. The first image showed the surface of their home world, Draconis Prime, but not as it appeared now. This was Draconis Prime as it had been millions of years ago, a barren, volcanic wasteland wreathed in toxic clouds. The earliest records of our species, Vorthak explained, speak of a time when we were little more than savage beasts, fighting over scraps of territory on a dying world. Our ancestors were powerful, yes, but they were not intelligent. Not truly. The image shifted, showing crude, cave paintings that depicted dragons not as the magnificent beings they were now, but as mindless predators driven by hunger and territorial instinct. Then, something changed. The hologram flickered to a new scene, the same volcanic landscape, but now dotted with strange structures that seemed to grow from the rock itself rather than being built upon it. According to legend, visitors came from the stars. Small, weak creatures that our ancestors should have devoured without thought. Faction leaned forward, his golden eyes studying the new images intently. The structures were clearly artificial, but their design was unlike anything in current draconian architecture. They seemed somehow organic, as if they had been coaxed into existence rather than constructed. The legends call them the gardeners, Vorthak continued. They say these beings did not come to conquer or to exploit. They came to nurture. That is absurd, Faction said, but his voice lacked conviction. No species would waste resources nurturing predators that could destroy them, unless those predators were not seen as threats, but as potential. Vorthak manipulated the archive controls, bringing up more images. Look at the progression, my emperor. See how quickly our ancestors changed. The holographic timeline showed a transformation that should have taken millions of years of natural evolution compressed into mere centuries. Dragons went from savage beasts to organized hunters to complex social creatures. Their brain capacity increased dramatically. Their lifespans extended. Most remarkably, they developed the telepathic abilities that now define their species. This is impossible, Faction breathed. Evolution does not work this quickly. No, Vorthak agreed. Evolution does not, but cultivation does. The baby made a soft sound from its silk nest, drawing both dragons' attention. It had somehow managed to make the crystal fragment glow brighter, and now it was holding it up toward them as if offering to share its discovery. 3 days, Vorthak said quietly. 3 days since this infant arrived, and already it has learned to manipulate our technology. Not through force or clever engineering, but through some form of resonance that our scientists cannot explain. It touches our crystal matrices, and they respond as if recognizing an old friend. Faction approached the nest cautiously, his massive form moving with a fluid grace that only dragons possessed. The baby looked up at him with those strange, fearless eyes, and made that musical sound that seemed to vibrate in harmony with the temple's crystal formations. What does it want from us? Faction asked. I do not think it wants anything, Vorthak replied. I think it simply exists in a state of constant giving. Watch. The ancient dragon reached out with one massive claw and gently touched the baby's forehead. The moment of contact sent ripples of energy through the temple's crystal network, and suddenly, both dragons were flooded with images. They saw Draconis Prime as it could be, not the industrialized world it had become, but something far more magnificent. Cities that grew like living things, their spires reaching toward the stars while their roots delved deep into the planet's core. Dragons and other species living together in harmony, each contributing their unique gifts to a civilization that spanned galaxies. Space itself transformed into a garden, with each star system carefully tended to maximize its potential for life and growth. But more than the images, they felt emotions that no dragon had ever experienced. A love so vast it encompassed entire species. A patience that could guide evolution itself. A wisdom that saw not what things were, but what they could become. The vision lasted only seconds, but when it ended, both dragons were trembling. By the ancient fires, Faction whispered, "What manner of beings are these humans?" "According to our oldest archives, they are our makers," Vorthak said. "But more than that, they are the makers of all intelligent life in this sector of the galaxy." "That cannot be true. The humans are barely 5 centuries spacefaring. They have no great technology, no vast fleets, no evidence of ancient civilization, because they do not need such things." Vorthak called up another section of the archives, this one showing star charts that spanned millions of years. "Look at the pattern, my emperor. See how intelligence appears across the galaxy." The star chart showed the emergence of spacefaring civilizations across time. At first, it appeared random, species developing intelligence and achieving spaceflight at different rates across countless worlds. But as Vorthak highlighted the data, a pattern became clear. Every species that had achieved true intelligence had done so after the appearance of a small, seemingly primitive species in their local star system. Species that arrived without fanfare, established small colonies, and then seemed to simply exist. They rarely made contact with the indigenous life forms, rarely interfered directly with their development. They simply lived quietly on the edges of civilization, generation after generation. And wherever they went, intelligence bloomed. The Zephyrians, Faction said, reading the data with growing amazement. Their evolution from simple telepathic animals to the great psychic civilization they are today, it happened after humans established a colony in the Rigel system. The Korthak warrior clans achieved spaceflight within 2 centuries of human settlement in their home system, Vorthak added. The Crystalline Collective developed quantum consciousness within 50 years of human arrival. Every single advanced civilization in our local galaxy cluster can trace its intellectual awakening to the presence of human colonies. But how is this possible? What mechanism could allow such a weak species to influence the evolution of stronger ones? Before Vorthak could answer, the baby began to cry. Not the distressed wailing that most infant creatures produced, but something that sounded almost like music. The crystal formations throughout the temple began to resonate with the sound, creating harmonics that seemed to reach into the very structure of space-time itself. Both dragons felt it immediately, a subtle but profound alteration in their own consciousness. Their thoughts became clearer, their perception sharper. It was as if the baby's cry was somehow optimizing the quantum patterns in their brains, making them more efficient, more capable. Quantum empathy. Vorthak breathed as understanding dawned. They do not manipulate evolution directly. They simply improve everything around them by their very presence. They're living catalysts for consciousness itself. The baby's crying subsided, but the effect lingered. Faction found himself thinking thoughts that would have been impossible just moments before, seeing connections and patterns that his previous mental capacity could never have grasped. The other species, he said slowly, the ones that achieved intelligence after human contact, do they know? Do they understand what they owe to these gardeners? I believe we are the first to make the connection, Vorthak replied. The humans themselves may not even be fully aware of what they do. It appears to be as natural to them as breathing. They simply exist, and consciousness grows around them like flowers reaching towards sunlight. And now one of them is here in our care. Faction looked down at the baby with new understanding. What are we supposed to do with this knowledge? I've been pondering that question for 3 days, Vorthak admitted. At first, I thought we should inform the Galactic Council, share this discovery with all species. But then I realized the danger in that course of action. What danger? Fear. Vorthak's mental voice carried the weight of cosmic responsibility. If the galaxy learns that humans are responsible for the intelligence of all other species, some will worship them as gods. Others will seek to destroy them as threats to the natural order. Either response could be catastrophic. Faction nodded slowly. The humans themselves seem unaware of their true nature. They present themselves as weak, primitive, even offering their own young as sacrifices when they have nothing else to give. They do not seek to dominate or rule, because that is not their nature, Vorthak said. They are gardeners, not emperors. They nurture and guide from the shadows, allowing each species to believe it achieved greatness through its own efforts. It is perhaps the most sophisticated and benevolent form of civilization the galaxy has ever seen. The baby had settled back into contentment, still playing with the glowing crystal. As they watched, it managed to create new patterns of light within the crystalline structure, patterns that neither dragon recognized, but which somehow felt familiar, like half-remembered dreams of a better world. My Emperor, Vorthak said formally, I request permission to undertake a secret mission. I wish to visit the human colonies, to observe them directly, and learn more about their true nature. If we are to properly understand what we have discovered, we need more data. Granted, Faction replied immediately. But take precautions. If what we suspect is true, the humans may be far more dangerous than they appear. Not because they are hostile, but because they are so beneficial that losing them could set back galactic civilization by millions of years. There is one more thing, Vorthak said hesitantly. The child. We cannot simply return it to the human colony. They believe they have given it to us as an offering, and they will expect it to be consumed. If we return alive, they will know something unusual has occurred. Then what do you propose? Vorthak looked down at the baby, who was now reaching toward him with obvious affection. I propose we keep it, raise it, learn from it, and in time perhaps we could begin to understand not just what humans are, but what we ourselves might become under their influence. Faction considered this carefully. The political implications were staggering. A dragon raising a human child would be unprecedented in galactic history. But the potential rewards... Do it, he said finally. But in absolute secrecy. Only you, I, and High Priest Zethrak must know the truth. To the rest of the Empire, the offering was accepted and consumed according to tradition. And the future? The future, Faction said, looking at the tiny being that had just revolutionized his understanding of existence itself, will be whatever this little gardener helps us make it. As the two ancient dragons made their plans, the human baby continued to play with the crystal, creating patterns of light that seemed to whisper of possibilities too vast and wonderful for any single mind to comprehend. Outside the temple, the Draconian Empire continued its daily business. Unaware that the foundations of their entire civilization had just been revealed to be built on the quiet benevolence of the species they had considered the weakest in the galaxy. The age of the gardeners was beginning, though it would be years before anyone realized it. 6 months had passed since the human infant arrived at the Temple of the Sacred Flame, and Vorthak was beginning to understand why the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had all flourished in the presence of these remarkable beings. The child, whom he had named Kira after an ancient Draconian word meaning light-bringer, was developing at a rate that defied all known biological patterns. While human infants typically required months to begin recognizing faces and sounds, Kira had been responding to complex telepathic communications within weeks. She couldn't speak yet in any conventional sense, but she had learned to project emotions and simple concepts directly into Vorthak's mind. More remarkably, these projections came with a clarity and precision that many adult telepaths would envy. Vorthak lay curled in the temple's meditation chamber, his massive form arranged in a protective circle around the small play area they had created for Kira. The child sat in the center, surrounded by various technological artifacts from across the galaxy, gifts from visiting dignitaries who had no idea what they were really contributing to. Each item in Kira's possession had been transformed in some subtle way. The Zephyrian meditation crystal now produced harmonic frequencies that could induce enlightenment states in even the most scattered minds. The Korthak battle blade had somehow become capable of cutting through the quantum foam itself, revealing the underlying structure of space-time. The crystalline collective's quantum processor had evolved into something that could calculate the probability matrices of entire universes. And Kira played with them all as if they were simple toys. She does not understand the magnitude of what she is doing, High Priest Zethrak observed, watching as Kira casually reconfigure a piece of ancient draconian technology that their best scientists had been studying unsuccessfully for decades. To her, these improvements are as natural as breathing. That is precisely the point, Vorthak replied, his mental voice thoughtful. She is not trying to improve anything. She simply exists in a state of optimization, and everything around her evolves to match her presence. It is the most elegant form of advancement I have ever witnessed. Emperor Thaction materialized in the chamber through the quantum transport system, his arrival preceded by the familiar shimmer of displaced energy. Over the past months, these secret visits had become routine. The Emperor found himself drawn to observe Kira's development, fascinated by the implications of what they were witnessing. "Any word from your reconnaissance mission to the human colonies?" Thaction asked, settling his massive form beside Vorthak. "The survey team returned yesterday with their preliminary reports," Vorthak replied. "What they found is both wonderful and terrifying in its implications." He activated the temple's holographic display system, bringing up detailed images of 3 different human colony worlds. Each showed similar patterns, small settlements scattered across continents, with human populations that seemed almost deliberately modest in size. No massive cities, no industrial complexes that scar the landscape, no obvious signs of advanced technology. On the surface, they appear to be exactly what they claim to be, Vorthak explained. Simple colonists living quiet lives, farming, crafting, raising families. But observe more closely. The holographic display zoomed in on one of the human settlements. At first, it looked utterly mundane. Small houses arranged around community gardens, children playing in parks, adults going about their daily tasks. But as the display highlighted energy signatures and biological readings, a different picture emerged. The soil around their settlements shows improvement in fertility that should take decades to achieve, Vorthak noted. Plants grow larger, healthier, more resistant to disease. Local wildlife populations increase and show enhanced intelligence behaviors. Even the weather patterns seem to stabilize in their vicinity. Terraforming, Thaction suggested. No evidence of terraforming technology anywhere. They appear to be accomplishing these improvements through their mere presence. And that is not the most remarkable discovery. The display shifted to show population charts and intelligence assessments of the non-human species on each world. Without exception, every indigenous life form showed signs of accelerated cognitive development. Primitive mammals were using tools. Plant life was exhibiting behaviors that suggested a form of collective consciousness. Even microorganisms were organizing themselves in patterns that resembled primitive neural networks. They are turning entire worlds into gardens of consciousness, Thaction breathed, not through conquest or technological intervention, but simply by existing among other life forms. The survey team made contact with several human families. Vorthak continued. They presented themselves as representatives of the Draconian Empire, conducting routine diplomatic assessments. The humans were welcoming, eager to please, and completely forthcoming about their activities. And what did they say about their apparent effect on local ecosystems? They claimed to have no knowledge of it. When presented with evidence of the improvements occurring around their settlements, they seemed genuinely surprised. Several suggested that perhaps they had simply chosen particularly favorable locations for their colonies. Kira chose that moment to make one of her musical sounds, drawing the attention of both dragons. She had been working with a complex quantum resonance device, a piece of technology so advanced that even draconian scientists could barely understand its basic functions. In her hands, it had transformed into something that seemed to be generating microportals into parallel dimensions. She's been doing that for the past hour, Zethrak reported nervously. Each portal leads to a slightly different version of our reality, ones where various catastrophic events never occurred. I believe she may be unconsciously attempting to optimize not just our current timeline, but the entire quantum probability matrix of existence itself. Close the portals, Faction ordered immediately. We are not ready for that level of reality manipulation. Vorthak approached Kira gently, projecting calming thoughts toward her. The moment his mind touched hers, the portals collapsed harmlessly. But in the brief instant before they closed, all three dragons glimpsed the alternative realities she had been accessing. Worlds where the Draconian Empire had achieved peace with all neighboring species, where resource scarcity was unknown, where the very concept of war had been forgotten. By the ancient fires, Faction whispered. She was not trying to change our reality. She was trying to show us better versions of it. The implications are staggering, Vorthak said. If all humans possess even a fraction of this ability, and if they're unconsciously spreading across the galaxy, improving everything they encounter, then we are witnessing the early stages of a galactic transformation that could last millions of years, Faction finished. A slow, gentle evolution toward a form of civilization we can barely imagine. Kira crawled toward Vorthak, her movements still unsteady but filled with obvious affection. When she reached his massive claw, she pulled herself upright and made that distinctive musical sound that always seemed to resonate with the temple's crystal formations. But this time, the sound was different, more complex, carrying harmonics that seemed to convey actual meaning. All three dragons received the message simultaneously, transmitted not through telepathy, but through some form of direct consciousness transfer that bypassed their normal mental defenses entirely. The meaning was simple yet profound. Family. Love. Growth together. Asterisk, she recognizes us as family, Zethrak said in amazement. But more than that, she sees our relationship as a template for something larger. She wants all species to experience this same bond. A galaxy united not through conquest or treaty, but through the simple recognition that all conscious beings are part of the same extended family, Vorthak mused. It is a vision of civilization so advanced that most species could not even comprehend it. Emperor Faction was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what they had discovered. Finally, he spoke with the weight of imperial authority. We must expand our research. I want detailed surveys of every human colony in our sector. I want historical analyses of every species that has achieved advancement since human contact. And I want absolute secrecy maintained until we fully understand the scope of what we are dealing with. My Emperor, Vorthak said carefully, there is another consideration. If humans are indeed responsible for the intellectual advancement of every spacefaring species in this region of the galaxy, then our very existence as intelligent beings is dependent upon their continued well-being. Explain. If something were to happen to the human species, disease, war, natural disaster, it could cause an intelligence cascade failure across dozens of civilizations. We might not lose our current capabilities immediately, but future generations could begin a slow regression toward our pre-contact state. The horror of this possibility hung in the air like a physical presence. Every major civilization in their sector of the galaxy owed its existence to the unconscious intervention of beings who thought of themselves as weak and primitive. We need a protection protocol, Faction decided. But it must be subtle. The humans must never realize they are being guarded, or their natural behavior patterns could be disrupted. I have been considering this problem, Vorthak said. I believe the solution lies not in protecting them, but in understanding them well enough to help them protect themselves. If we can determine how their consciousness enhancement effect works, we might be able to amplify it, making them more resilient and their influence more widespread. Kira had fallen asleep against Vorthak's claw, her tiny form rising and falling with peaceful breaths. Even in sleep, she continued to emit those subtle quantum fluctuations that seemed to optimize everything around her. The crystals in the temple glowed more brightly. The air itself felt more energizing, and all three dragons found their thoughts clearer than they had ever been. She is growing stronger, Zethrak observed. Each day, her effect becomes more pronounced. What will she be like when she reaches maturity? If our theories are correct, Vorthak replied, she will be the key to understanding humanity's true potential. But we must be careful. We are raising her in an artificial environment, surrounded by beings who know her true nature. This could alter her development in unpredictable ways. Or it could accelerate it, factions suggested. Perhaps what humanity needs is not protection, but recognition. They have been gardening consciousness across the galaxy for centuries while believing themselves to be insignificant. Imagine what they might accomplish if they understood their true purpose. That is a dangerous path, Vorthak warned. Knowledge of their own power could corrupt them, turn them from gardeners into gods. The galaxy is not ready for humanity to claim its rightful place as the architects of consciousness. Then what do you propose? Vorthak looked down at Kira, still sleeping peacefully in his protection. We continue to learn. We watch. We document everything. And when the time is right, when the galaxy has evolved enough to accept the truth, we reveal what we have discovered. But until then, we serve as guardians of the greatest secret in galactic history. And if other species discover what we have learned, then we pray they have the wisdom to handle it responsibly, Vorthak said, because the future of consciousness itself may depend upon how this knowledge is used. As the three dragons settled into contemplative silence, the temple of the sacred flame continued its quiet humming, resonating with the presence of a sleeping human child whose very existence was slowly transforming the fundamental nature of reality. Outside, the Draconian Empire continued its ancient traditions, unaware that their greatest temple had become a nursery for a revolution that would eventually encompass the entire galaxy. The age of the gardeners was no longer coming. It had already begun.